everyone, it's Agatha, and I'm really sorry I haven't been making many videos lately. Hopefully this will be the successful one. So today I thought I would make a video where I tell you my crazy Lyft driver stories. It's not clickbait, I think they're crazy, but that's because I don't, by my standards, hopefully you consider them kind of interesting. So, yeah, as with any video where I attempt to stick to a topic, it's probably not gonna, see, I didn't even remember where I put the list of topics. So as with any video I do where I attempt to stick to a topic, it's not really gonna happen, but we're gonna try, and I'll try not to make the chair creak too much. So, okay, so I think it was the second time I was riding in a taxi, a cab, what do you call them? Okay, and there was this guy, and he was like he had like this long blonde hair. I won't tell you too much because I don't want you to like find these people, which if that's really far-fetched, you won't. But anyway, so there was this guy, and he was, so he starts talking to me. He's like, oh, what were you up to? Like, where are you coming from? And I'm like, oh, And he's like, oh, and I'm like, so what's your job? Because he was kind of, digging, and I was like, and he's like, oh, I'm a graphic design student, and like, he's like a photographer, but he wasn't having very good luck with his photography, some kind of issue with getting work, which I guess is common. He said he's self-taught. He's like, oh, what camera do you have? And I told him, and he's like, oh, I considered that one. And that's all very boring. So he's like, oh, my portfolio is over in here. And he like reaches into the passenger seat and like digs and pulls out this portfolio. And I'm like, he carries his portfolio? I'm like, okay. He's like, here, you can look at it. It wasn't like a physical portfolio. It was like an iPad with a scrolling, and I'm like, oh, I'm a germphobe. But I didn't want to be like, oh, I won't look at your art. So I was scrolling through, and there were like kind of these different photos and stuff. Most of them were just like city skyline, like nothing I hadn't seen before. And then one of them is like this, was taken in like this sort of red velvety room, and there's like this lady, and she's like in this sort of like, not like NSFW, but like kind of like snazzy kind of revealing outfit, and like pose like looking threatening, and I'm like, is that and so he's like, so what do you think? And I'm like, oh, I like make some kind of general positive comment, and he's like, well, he tells me that the photo of the lady, she's a dominatrix, and the thing is, she's been having him take photos of her for free. He's been agreeing to do it for free, he says, because she has some website that she says gets a lot of views, and she thinks she's convincing him that it'll help his photography somehow if he like helps her take like her fancy, like portrait shots, I guess, for her work. And I'm like, I was pretty like straight up with him. I was like, you doing work for free like that's probably, if nothing's happened yet, it seems kind of like a bad idea. And he was like, kind of like very wishy-washy. He's like, well, I don't know. She keeps asking me to do it, and I don't want to say no. And that's about it for that guy. Oh, but then he goes on and he like starts talking about all the equipment he has in the car with him. Like in the passenger seat, he has a box, and he says there's like $2,000, $3,000 or something dollars worth of like equipment in it. And I'm like, why are you telling me that? What if I'm a thief? Do I look like a thief? But anyway, that was about it for that guy. That doesn't sound so crazy now that I say it. I just thought it was kind of amusing. And so the next guy was this guy. He was like, I got in the car and I was worried, like, because he seems sort of like a sleepy guy. But I don't think he was on anything, even though he was just really, really mellow. Kind of, the other guy before this also had that vibe. I don't know, maybe that's how people are. But, so there's this guy, he's really mellow, and he starts saying, I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh, maybe that's... And he's like, where should I go to lunch? What's around here? And I still start telling him places. He's like, what are you having for lunch? And I'm like, I think I said I was making like some fried rice or jambalaya or something. And he said, oh, that sounds good. I love sausages. I was like, oh, I'm a vegetarian, so I make it with fake ones or something like that. And he starts up, he has a story about how when he was a kid, he tells me in the Ukraine, I think it was, when he was 7 years old, his grandmother up in the mountains on her farm, she got kicked by a cow and her knee was injured, so she needed help on the farm. So when he was 7, his mom or somebody sent him up there, and so he's meets his grandmother there, and she's making dinner, and she's like, okay, she hands him a dull knife, and she says, go get 2 chickens for me. And I'm like, oh, wow. And he says, yeah, and it was very, very startling for me at that age. He said he went, and it was his first time killing anything, but he went and he killed the chickens, because what else are you gonna do? And then he says gradually his grandmother worked him up until he was killing cows, just him versus a cow. And I'm like, wow. I mean, and I said, well, I mean, I think it's good, that you know the reality of it when you eat meat, because a lot of people don't think about it. And he's like, yes, I don't have any problem killing my own food. He said just last week or something. I was like, I don't remember exactly how long ago it was. This is why I have trouble telling stories, because I always get stuck on a detail. It doesn't matter whether it was last week or not. He was just, okay. But anyway, he says, yeah, last week I went down to Wisconsin. See, it doesn't matter, but I get stuck. And then he said, yeah, my friend had a whole pig ready for me. And so he said he took a gun. It's a lot easier than the dull knife, I guess. That's a step up. And he shot the pig, and he brought it, and he put it in his house and froze it, I guess. Yeah. And I said, oh, well, does it taste really different from store-bought meat? And I don't remember what he said. I think he said something about like the color is different because they eat grass. I don't know, so that's it for him. Another driver, actually the most recent driver I had, was this guy. He was like, I don't know, this middle-aged guy. And like, I got in the car and he like starts talking to me. He's like, oh, how old are you? What do you like do? Stuff like that. And he tells me that he works as a driver, just as a part-time job. And he has these really young kids, even though he's like middle-aged. And he starts telling me about how great the schools are and stuff like that. And finally he gets onto the topic of his nephew, and he's got a lot to say about his nephew. Apparently his nephew is this like up and coming rapper, and he told me the name, but I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to get into, I don't know anything about rap really, but I looked him up and he's somewhat big. I think I'd actually seen him before. I looked up one of the music videos and I'd actually seen it before, I think. I couldn't tell if it was good or not because I'm not up to date with what's good with rap. But anyway, he's telling me that he is not really very proud of his nephew's music, that he thinks it's unoriginal, he doesn't like the production, he doesn't think it's good stuff, and he's like, the nephew has this opportunity, the big rappers are working with him, he could really make it big if he made good music. And he says that he talks to his nephew and he tries to coach him on how to make better music, better rap music. And apparently the nephew doesn't really listen. He's like, oh yeah, but he doesn't really change his music. And he says that he's just thought that maybe he just needs an extra push. So the middle-aged guy, the uncle, he goes into GarageBand and he goes into GarageBand, and so he samples this song called Mambo Italiano by some guy from like the Frank Sinatra era, I forget who, and he makes it like sort of a backing track demo or something, and he sends it to the nephew, and the nephew doesn't use it. I'm like, wow, well, you really took it into your own hands, that's cool. He's like, yeah, and he says, I'm worried about him, I'm worried he's wasting his opportunities. And he's like, wait, how old are you? And I'm like, I'm 18. And he's like, well, one adult to another, he says, one adult to another, you know, he just smokes too much weed. Oh my god. So I'm like, yes, sometimes that can like make people less motivated if they always smoke a lot of weed. I didn't laugh in the actual situation, but it's fun to laugh about it now. And he's like, yeah, he smokes too much weed. It's all about his image for his Instagram followers. Yeah, what else did he tell me? He did tell me this one other thing. But I don't think I should say it because I think it could make it too easy to guess who the guy is. So, but that's probably my favorite of like the stories I've gotten from drivers, but I'm not gonna say anymore because this uncle guy was really nice, and I don't want to like get him in trouble with his nephew. And so, another guy I had was, I've got him written down here as speech impediment. I'll just show you my list. He's grueling man, this man, because I had this man as a driver twice, and his rating's slightly lower than most drivers. Not bad, but just a little lower. And so I got in the car, and he's like, I find out why really fast, because this guy is dark. He's like telling dark stories, because this guy has had like every end of life, tough, facing death job that you could ever possibly have. He's telling me he worked with, like, what do you call it? What do you call, like, end of life, like, really, really elderly people who are kind of on their deathbed, that kind of care. He worked as, like, a nurse in that. Then he was also some kind of army nurse or medic. And then I think he also worked at, I think, a morgue. So he's doing all these jobs no one wants to do. And at the time it was also like this was at the same time as the flooding in Texas, which I mean is still like a thing, but you know, it was like when it just happened, he was telling me, yeah, I'm gonna go down there. And this guy is so somber all the time. He's just thinking these dark thoughts about what he's seen. I don't know. And so he's always talking about this stuff about the elderly and how they're not being cared for properly, and the things he tries to do, and how like he's working at this home for these really, really old people, and all the things he wishes he could do for them, but he can't. And so finally I'm like, well, does this make you worry about when you get really old? Because this guy's like 65 or something like that. And he's like, yes, it does. And I'm like, oh. And so it starts talking about his health. And I'm like, oh. And he is telling me about how he needs to eat more fish and vegetables, and more, when he eats too much rice, he's saying, I'm saying maybe brown rice would be healthier, and he's like, but it doesn't taste as good, or something like that. I don't know, but this guy's like really kind of heavy talk all the time, but I really enjoyed him. I give him 5 stars every time, because it was, you know, really makes you think about life kind of guy. That kind of guy. But yeah, a lot of sad stories from that one. And another one I was in was a driver who actually crashed the car. Not like a big crash, but I was with my friend, and we were going to the beach. We were planning to go to the beach, and we got in the car, and the guy's driving, and I was not paying attention to how he was driving, really. He wasn't driving super fast or anything bizarre like that, so I wasn't noticing. And my friend and I were just kind of gossiping. I was mouthing off as usual about something I don't remember. And then this car, I don't know, suddenly this car hits like the front passenger side, and it's like, ugh. And I scream, because I always scream even if I'm not injured. I'm just like, you know, just because I get startled. And I got like the wind knocked out of me, and I was like, oh, my ribs broken. But they were not. I was fine. I just like, I grabbed my head, and I got like punk rocker head, you know, where they're like, yeah, or whatever. What do they do? It's not this. It's like, it's this. They do this, and they shake their heads. And I got like punk rocker kind of head, but I didn't get a concussion or anything. And my friend was also fine. But yeah, we were like stranded. And then like this cop came, and we told the cop what happened. My friend was paying more attention. And it was like a thing like with a blind intersection, and our driver did not look both ways. He just like stopped at the stop sign sort of, then went, and so the car hit us. But that one's not that interesting. Everybody was fine. So yeah, that was the car crash that nobody got injured in. and I've had more interesting drivers, but I don't remember the stories well enough. So that's pretty much it. I hope that was sort of interesting or sort of ASMR. I feel like this video is really neither here nor there, but I don't know, if you were ever my cab driver and you want me to not talk about you, just email me and I'll take this video down. And if this video gets taken down, that's why. Probably. Okay. Thank you for watching, everybody, and bye.